Good morning. Those of you that don't know, I'm Billy Carter. Not directly, but about 12 generations from the fellow named Jimmy that was one of our presidents. But we won't need to go any further with that. I've been an owner of Stinson for about 19 years, restored 8 of them, working on my 9th one. There's not a lot that I don't know about them. I learn something every day and every week. Jody is our president of the International Stinson Club. Sorry, our treasurer, Lynn O'Donnell, isn't up here. She's been a Stinson owner about as long as I have and quite knowledgeable. Many of you are familiar with our Yahoo, International Stinson chat group. How many of you are international members, the International Stinson Club? I'd like to suggest, not a demand and a requirement, but suggest that you do join the International Stinson Club. That gives us a little funds to do our research and carry on many of the things that we need to do to support you, gentlemen and ladies. If you own a short wing Piper, join that club. Your best information for the type of aircraft that you have is through the type clubs. Vendors and those people, a lot of suppliers are out there to take your money. Stay with your club and get the latest information. I think there's probably a question and answer type form. I'll be open to most questions. Those that I can't answer, someone here should be able to. And if any of you have any specific stories you'd like to tell about your Franklin or your Stinson, be free to come up and share that with us. As many of you may know or may not know, Jody owns the the phototype of the IO360 that Univair got the STC for. It's went through 1 or 2 hands since they sold it. Jody was lucky enough to latch on to it. A very nice Stinson with a nice engine in it. Personally, I haven't gotten into changing over from the Franklins, but someday I probably will. And I'm not too sure it would be a negative if I did. So let Jody have a few words to say with you.
Good morning. So I'm Jody Jones, president of the International Stinson Club. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out here tonight or today. And is there any new owners out here, new Stinson owners? We got a few. All right, good. Any first-time guests to come to the 108 Forum? Okay, all right. Well, we're going to change this up a little bit for the ones who have been here in the past. We had Larry Wheelock, who is a wealth of knowledge and put together a good presentation. And today what we're going to do is it'll be more of a question and answer session, followed by, before, Billy's going to speak a little on the history of the Stinsons. Also have in the group here, Bret Chilcott will also speak on his ownership of newly acquiring, 2 years into it, 3 years, 2.5 years of owning a Stinson and what he went through and his purchase. And I see Dave James in the back there that if he'd like to also come up here and join us. No? I'm getting a no. Okay. Well, we have more tech-savvy guru in the back there that can talk Stinson with you, but anyways, he'll keep us straight if we get off course. But also, I'd like to invite everyone who would like to come to the Stinson dinner tonight. Come see us at the Type Club tent, or the vintage hangar. Yeah, it's a vintage hangar. At our table, we're going to Wentz on the Lake. I've got ground transportation set up in front of the Vintage Red Barn at 6 o'clock. Just come sign up. It will not cost you anything for the transportation, but if you're interested in Stinsons, it'll be a great time to just sit around and ask these guys questions, a one-on-one, and it will be worth your while of gathering that information. Like Billy said, I'm fairly new. I've owned my Stinson about 5 years now. It was the after Wentz. Good point, Gil. We are going to Leon's to have ice cream, so it's worth a trip there. So it's quite the treat. So, but my Stinson, like Billy said, it was a test Stinson for the STC of the IO 360 that Univair put together in 1980. They bought it in 79, restored it, and in 81 they achieved the STC on that. So, the Franklins are great engines, but there are options out there besides a Franklin in a Stinson, and I just thought I'd throw that out there. So, also I'd like to thank Randy in the back. He's recording this. We also have a Stinson YouTube channel for all the tech stuff that, from changing filters or oil or fixing or working on whatever. He's putting that together. Also, I believe Bret's he's got a YouTube channel as well. So we've got a lot of collaboration of information out there. And with the Yahoo group, our Stinson forum page, and the Facebook page, I'd invite you to just check in with one of them. And with that, I'll just turn this over to Billy, and we'll just get started from there. You want the mic loose, or leave it there?
Gives me something to lean against. I need something to support myself once in a while. My back gives me some problems. I was up on top of a wing and coming down from a ladder, and I thought I was near the floor, and I stepped down about 3 rungs before I hit the concrete. My right leg kind of got numb all the way up to my belt line, So I'm sure I impacted something, but I'm getting over it. Jody suggested I give you a brief history on the Stinson. As you know, the Stinson family was of Indian descent out of Oklahoma, Cherokees. And that's the reason we got the Stinson logo of the drone bow and the arrow on most of the aircraft. And today those logos can be purchased from Univair. Going back, the 108 was engineered, and I'm sure the engineers had it put together pretty good because they named it the 108. And it's my opinion, and Larry Wheellocker's and several others, that they gave it the 108 because that's what it cruises at. So you can decide if those are knots or miles, but that's where it came from. The straight 108 and then the 108-1, had the 150 horsepower on it. They made just a slight difference designed to call let's get back, the 108 was basically a VFR airplane. They made the Dash 1, and it was an IFR airplane. That's the reason you've got the bigger instrument panel and the IFR instruments in it and radios. So that became the Dash 1. They built the Dash 2 thinking that they could, hey, 165 horsepower would be great. But then they discovered they needed trim, so they designed a bungee trim system to put in it. That bungee trim system can be purchased today, and it's on the type certificate and a service letter that if you modify your airplane from the 150 to the 165 or any other higher horsepower engine, 2 things you must do. One is half-inch fuel lines from your oil tanks all the way down, plus your carburetor, and a bungee trim system put in it. That qualifies you. Otherwise, there's no reason. The service letter says that none of the fuselages won't accept the higher horsepower engines. They're basically all the same. They went on, they discovered that many new owners were wanting the higher, the 165. They were putting floats and pontoons on them. But with the small tail, it got quite fishy. It would bounce from side to side. So they came up with about a 24 by 24 sheet of 70 thousandths, and through reinforcing mounting on the end of your horizontal stabilizers, they made a three-tail out of it. Mounted that in between your elevator and the stabilizer. Well, Maltese didn't particularly like the looks of that. That's might have made it look too much like a Balanka, you know? So they came up, they said, we can do better. We'll just put a big tail on there, and we won't have to, we can bypass that bungee trim system and put just a regular trim cable like we've got for the elevator, and that'll trim the rudder. And that's how they come up with the Dash 3. Now, something else I'd like to point out, with the big tail, it being designed that way, it could easily go on floats. And the Dash 3 is the only airplane that was built without a handhold on the back of the airplane to pick it up and move it around. Who could do it with it on floats, right? So my theory is that they built the Dash 3 to go on floats. Not necessarily. It'll fly on land too. That's the reason they came out with wheels. And you could, and also, if you look at any of the certified aircraft, if it's going to be put on floats, the FAA gives it another 150, 160 pounds gross weight. Thus the extra gross weight on the Dash 3 than the other ones. Otherwise, they're the same airplanes. And that stands true if it's a Cessna or whatever make airplane you're looking at. It comes out of the factory to go on floats. The FIA, if it's going on floats, it's got the extra gross weight on it. So getting back to the more of the history on the airplane, Eddie was the primary drive behind it. His sister made the Stinson Company quite famous at 14, flying around the country as the flying schoolgirl. She learned to fly in a warp wing with 2 sticks and a pusher engine. And I think one of the fellows that from Ohio that flew the first airplane taught her how, one of the Wright brothers. And she later made her own school, taught many people how to fly out of her flight school. Of course, she had instructors there too, but getting back, Eddie Stinson, I don't know if you realized or not, was the primary source for learning how to get out of a stalled spin. Up until he discovered that, every pilot that got into a spin would die. Eddie was flying one morning at only about 3,000 feet, trying out some speed maneuvers, got it into a high-speed stall, spun out, and only 2 or 3 days earlier he had had a close friend that's laid on the ground for about 6 hours screaming and wouldn't let everybody touch him until he passed away. Well, Eddie said, I'm going to get over this real fast. He said, I'm going to fly it in. So he pushed the stick forward. When he did, the airplane started flying. Came out of the spin. He said, what in the world is this? He went back up to about 5,000 and did it 2 more times. He went back to the airport. Now, this was early, only about 10:30 in the morning. He told the fellows back at the airport, he said, guys, you're looking at a dead man. All right, what have you been drinking, Eddie? We know you've been out late last night. What happened? I said, well, this is it, guys. I got into spins, and I went back and did it 2 more times, and I found out how to fly out of them. All right, you're just full of it. Now, come on, I'll take one of you up. Well, after many debating and maybe a flip of a coin, he got one of them to go up with him. And about 3 weeks later, the Army drafted him in. This was at the beginning of the war, and he was drafted in to teach all of the Army pilots how to stall, get out of the spin, and save their lives. So he was in the military for a short while. He did get killed in one of his Stinsons, but it was a gull wing, one of the larger round engine airplanes. He had had a fuel quantity problem, working on the instrument that morning, was supposed to take the airplane and show it off, I understand, in Chicago. And he left the shop flying over late, got low on fuel, and the engine quit. He went to set it down in the park and hit the flagpole with tip with one wing. It spun around, his head hit the side of the fuselage, and he passed away that night. But they carried on, and the airplanes, his wife was quite involved in the company also. In fact, the serial number 88 airplane that I have, my granddaughter claims, it has her name on the bill of sale. The company that bought it was a charter outfit in Nebraska, and it went there for a number of years and changed hands about 6 or 8, and I bought it as a frame. And it had the airworthiness certificate, the data plate with it, and all of the ribs that went on the side was tied together with 4 bundles of barbed wire. So that was Chloe's airplane. But we'll get away from that subject. But of course, you know, the automobile company that was building the high-priced automobile in the 1948 needed engines for his automobile. That was Tucker, right? And Chevrolet, Ford, GMC, nobody would sell him engines, so he bought the Franklin Company. Of course, he went bankrupt because he didn't make but 6 or 8 cars. The prices were way too high, and in that time, nobody could afford to pay that much for an automobile. Hey, they could buy a Stinson for $5,000, you know. So he went bankrupt. Since he owned the engine company, it went bankrupt with him, and Vultese could no longer get the Franklin to go on the Stinsons, and they had to file bankruptcy. Of course, they left about 60 or 80 airplanes sitting on a ramp that was finished that hadn't been bought, and about another 80 in airplane parts in the hangar. I believe it was in about 1951, Piper bought them. And Piper immediately sold off the other Stinsons, and the ones they put together, they put the higher horsepower, the 180 Franklin in it that was going in helicopters and tanks. They put that engine in that area, those airplanes, and they called it the L5, or, I mean, was it the L5? No. But anyway, it was the Piper Stinson, okay? Piper took the only twin, small twin, which was a 6-passenger airplane that Vultese had built, and they took it apart, and they figured the design of it, and they Piper built their first twin from that, and that was, they gave it the Indian name of the Apache. And every airplane they built after that, they gave them Indian names until they designed a different wing structure. So you'll notice the Tripacer has got the same wing and stuff, but since it was already on the drawing board and been produced, it didn't get an Indian name. But your Comanche, the Cherokee, and all of the engines, all of the airplanes that Piper put out until Lock Haven flooded, and they opened up again in Vero Beach. Then they had new engineers, and they designed and built different airplanes. What more can I tell you? Any questions? Your oil coolers. Gentleman just dropped by from Pacific Oil Cooler and dropped off a bunch of handouts. They do make an oil cooler identical to the air-cooled oil cooler that came off of the original Franklins, but they make it out of aluminum. And it's probably about 12 pounds lighter. Very efficient. I have one of them. I bought it last year. and they are certified for certified aircraft. There is, identical to the original. I know there's Niagara and a few of them around that have STCs to buy, and you have to put a Veritherm in line someplace. You have to run a line all the way around your engine to come back to it. It really looks like a lot of tubing and a lot of excess oil going around that engine and coming back to be able to get back in that engine. I prefer that type of cooler. Not trying to sell them, but in fact, going back about 15 years ago, I sent Pacific, one of the original ones, to see if they could repair it, because I had gone through 3 different companies, and one of them happened to be out in Arizona, and the man kept saying, well, I'm wading around in melted lead and sorter here. He says, I just can't get that thing stopped. He said, I'll let you know in a day or two. And finally, I just gave up on him, you know. If he's going to lie to me that many times, he needed to just go ahead and keep it. But so I had another one, and I sent to Pacific Oil Coolers to see if they could repair it. They came back and says, it was just too bad. So everything that they plugged up and started another one that would start up someplace. Says, if you like, we'll send yours back to you if you want to pay the postage on it. I said, look, could you do me a favor? Get one of your engineers to look it over and see if you can design one like it. Because I'm sure there's a lot of Franklin drivers out there that would like to buy one similar to it, but in better shape. These things are getting 50, 60 years old, and we can't expect them to last forever. We need a good source of a good oil cooler. And it took them up, 14 years to come up with one. But they did it, and it is certified now. Parts. Your best source for engine parts is, of course, Susan Perel. If any of you know her, she's located out in Juliet, Texas. You can get in touch with her just by punching in Franklin Air Parts, and that's Susan Perel in Juliet, Texas. She's been a supporter for, 40 years or more. And that your best gaskets, of course, is out of, I wouldn't go with any of the paper and the cork gaskets. If you have rocker box covers or oil pan gaskets that's leaking, or the top pan that's cover that's leaking, real gaskets in Elizabethton, Tennessee, they make a red neoprene gasket, and I guarantee you put that on per their instructions, and you will never have an oil leak in those areas. Real gasket. I believe the cost of the oil cooler is around $900. Don't quote me on that. You'd have to pass a brochure to him, if you will. Those of you that have fuel stains coming back across the top of your wing from your filler caps, you know about it, do you? Well, yeah. 19 years ago, when I bought serial number 520, I discovered that was a chronic problem with it, and got to looking in on it. The fuel cap, I ordered a new one from Univar, and it came identical to ones that was on it. It had been a modified 1950 Mercury venting fuel cap. It was built so it would vent, and they drilled a hole in the center of it, put a 1/4-inch pipe, and bent it forward, and that was the fuel cap you were supposed to use. Well, if you turn it over and look at it and take the gasket out from the inside of it, you'd see that where there's two holes in the center of the cap, and those holes are directed between the three pieces of mashed and formed metal to where it comes out onto the outside of the cap. So when you put it on, and the top of your tank is, inside your tank is pressurized at about 3 psi, I understand, and any fuel that got slashed up against that tank was blown through those holes and on the outer side of your fuel, your full fuel neck under the tank. I called Univar, called their attention to it, and would I like to speak to one of their engineers? I certainly would. Engineer came on, I said, now look, this is what all of the Stinsons I've seen flying around the country are developing fuel stains back across the wing. You know, we don't want an AD against these airplanes. You're the type certificate holder, and I'm going to bring your attention to something. All of the caps that you have in your storage are vented automobile caps. We need a different design. We need something better. I said, now I went to the problem of soldering and plugging those holes up, and that cures it somewhat, but everybody doesn't know. That's kind of, trying to reinforce an old bridge. We need something better. About 2 or 3 months later, Bill, one of the primary salesmen in Colorado, called me out and says, what's your home address? I gave it to him, and he said, okay. I said, why is this, Bill? He said, well, one of our engineers has got something to send you, and we want you to check it out. They mailed me 2 caps that they had made that goes in the straight 108s. Now, they made another one for the Dash 3, and it's made out of about 300 thousandths solid aluminum sheet. And it's a solid cap cut out with a hole drilled in the center of it, with a pipe coming through for the early birds. The Dash 3, of course, have the impact pipe out on the outer side of the tank. Well, then it's got very similar to your Piper and your Cessna clips mounted on the inside of it for it to attach to the top of your filler neck. A good solid fuel cap. I suggest you go that way. I also discovered that the filler neck, where it's mounted onto the fuel tank, was mounted on with, I want to call PK screws or threaded screws, with only a gasket between the filler neck and the top of the tank. And the bottom of the screws were run through Tinnerman nuts, nothing but a piece of metal that was a hole drilled through it and 2 ends of it bent over, and when you tightened the screw, it pulled it up tight. Well, that threaded screw, after time, started bleeding fuel out around it, so all around the top of your tank would be fuel coming out of there and running back. Well, I don't know if I should get Univar involved in this or not, but so I sat down and came up with an idea, and I bought some, in fact, I have bought many of them, and I think I've dispersed and sold about 30 some of these kits now. But it involves 6 nut plates that are domed, and they've got a metal, a rubber O-ring on the inside of it. So when you install it, it makes a perfect seal. So I came up, a friend of mine has a water milling machine, and he cut me out some rings. And these rings are about 60 thousandths thick. And I take and mount them underneath a filler cap, pick up the holes, mount the nut plates on the inside of it, and put a slit in it so you can open it up and screw it down inside and on the inside of your tank. And I went to Univar and started buying their gaskets for between the filler neck and the tank, and they went from $4 up to about $9 something now a gasket. Real Gaskets is working on a deal to make me some more gaskets out of their neoprene rubber that will withstand either auto fuel or AV 100. So I may go that route and come up with cheaper O-rings or gaskets to go under it. The little kit that I make up has got 6 stainless steel screws for both left and right, a total of 12. It's a total of 12 832 screws and one 2-inch screw that you can put down through the filler neck, through the gasket on top of the tank, and then screw your reinforcement plate down inside the tank and install another gasket between it and the bottom top of the tank. So you've got 2 gaskets sandwiching the top of the tank and then a filler neck on it, and you install this. I make them and sell them for $315 a set for both sides, left and right. My granddaughter, which is now 17, and her brother helped me make about 6 or 8 of them going back a few years ago, and I've been making them ever since. And people that have gotten them works real well. Lynn O'Donnell has a set. I have a set on 2 of my airplanes. And hey, what can I say? The material I have in them, if you go to the nut plates and you figure that they're $290 a piece, you've got 6 of those going in each wing. And then you've got the stainless steel screws. The gaskets are about $10 a piece, 9 something. And by the time I'm all through, I've got a little money soaked up into that. So I'm not making much on it whenever I can make enough for 2 airplanes in about 1 day. You know, so my labor comes pretty cheap sometimes. You know. More questions. Best answers for crankshafts. If you have a metal prop, get a wooden one. It's best insurance for it. Wooden prop is not as efficient, but the metal props will definitely break that crankshaft. If you're flying a Franklin in there, a metal prop will break it. Going back 15 years ago, one of the Stinsons that I had restored had an engine in it that had 180 hours on it. I think Greg Lucas had rebuilt it and did a good job with it. I flew it, had it up for sale, I sold a Stinson for $28,000. Guy come up from Columbia to there at Moxville where I had it based at. He's a 12,000 hour UPS driver, and he wanted himself a Stinson. So I went flying with him for about an hour, and every few minutes I'd look at it and he'd pull the throttle back to about 2,300. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. 2150 to 23 is the critical range. Stay out of it. It will break your crankshaft. I'd push the throttle back in. He said, Mr. Carter, I've always been taught, and I have 12,000 hours plus, that 70% is the best RPM to run your engine at. Better for the engine and better economy. I said, please fly this airplane like you stole it. I said, let's go to 2,600. That's where your horsepower is at. You won't get the best economy for it. Fly it at 2,600, go up 7,000 or 8,000 feet, start leaning it back after you get to about 5, and go on up. Richen it up before you descend. I know all of that bull. Okay. I said, but let's fly it at 26. He said, do you want to sell this airplane or not? I said, well, I'll put it to you this way. If you insist on flying it other than 26, I'm not going to sell it to you. But I want you to fly it to 26 until you get back to my airport. So we did, and he agreed to buy it. Well, less than a month later, he called me. Guess where I'm at? I have no idea. Where would you be? I'm standing in Oshkosh. Oh, good, you flew the airplane up to Oshkosh. Dang, I wanted to go this year, but wasn't able to. Tell me how it went. Well, at Denton. I got near Bloomingdale, Indiana, and I was just below 10,000 feet, and I'm almost 10 miles out, and I pulled the throttle back to land, and the prop kept going around, but the engine quit making any noise. Say what? He said, I'm standing at the type tent in Vintage Aircraft talking to a bunch of Stinson people here at a table. And there's a guy by the name of Robert sitting here who said that if I would get that airplane down to Wilkesboro, he'd buy it from me. They tell me that the crankshaft broke. I said, what RPM were you flying at? I don't want to go there. Okay. I'll tell you what. I know an acquaintance that'll drive up with me. We'll have to spend the night. We'll probably get there in time to pull the wings off of it and some of the controls. We can get it on his gooseneck flatbed and pull it down back for you. But he's going to charge you $2,000 for his 2 days' work. I'll do it for free just because you bought the airplane from me, and I'm that kind of a guy. But you're going to have to pay our expenses, our motel room and our meals. All right, it's a deal. So he met us at Bloomingdale. We had the airplane loaded that night, and the airport have a guest house that was open to us. He had made arrangements for that, but he showed up with his wife, and he says, my wife and I had plans of staying here. We were going to take you over and put you in a motel. And I said, too late now. We've done put all of our clothes and stuff in the bedrooms. I said, in fact, we're going in to take a shower now. All right, we'll go get a motel room. So I thought, all right. The guy kind of backs off on his word every once in a while here, you know. He hadn't listened to me to start with on that crankshaft, so I'm getting leery of him. He says, when you get to Wilkesboro, Robert said he would be there, and you go ahead and unload the airplane, and we'll mail you the expenses and the $2,000. Just let us know how much it is. Tell you what, I'm going to keep in touch with you, and I'll call you 2 hours out from Wilkesboro. And when we get to Wilkesboro, I'm going to expect you to be there within about an hour by the time we get ready to unload the airplane, but it's not going to be unloaded until you show up. And if you're not there, we're going to take it back to Knoxville, and it'll stay at my house until you get ready to pay us to bring it back to Wilkesboro and our trip up here. Okay? I'm not going there. So he did meet us, and that turned out all right. The airplane is now up here at Watertown, in Wisconsin. Another fellow, when Robert had a new engine, sent it back out to Oklahoma, Pauls Valley, Oklahoma. Greg Lucas rebuilt it. He got it back, touched the airplane up some, and he sold it. New owner came down, and I flew with him for about 2 hours, and he took off to Watertown, called me 6 hours and 15 minutes later and said, I'm sitting on my back porch looking at that beautiful airplane sitting in my hangar. He says, so he comes up here every once in a while. You'll see him. It's a nice, a light blue and a real beautiful yellow Stinson, a straight 108. You're correct. They do, and they have, and there's a lot of them out there, and I think the prop shaft sticks out just 2.5 or 3 inches further, but the scarcity of those props that goes on that is getting hard to find. But it is a way to go. Fuel additives for 100 low lead. They have STP, and there's another brand, TCP, TCP, and that is supposed to dissolve the lead. But it's been my experience, after about 3 years, you may have a bigger experience. It is highly corrosive, and it'll eat up all your exhaust pipes, your exhaust muffler. Check the price on those things. Univar went up on them, went up tremendously. You used to be able to get them through Wag-Aero. Wag-Aero had them for sale for about $325. So did Univar. 4 years ago, I showed up here at the Oshkosh and was dropping off some wheel pants that a missionary school had given me. I had about 18 sets of wheel pants and a few generators that had come off, and people that went to not generators, starters, and they went to the ultralight starters on Cessnas and things of that nature. And when putting my stuff in there, I looked over and I saw 2 exhaust mufflers. I said, those are all for Franklin's. I said, mind if I look at some? No, but don't touch, and you can't buy anything until Tuesday. Okay. We open at 9 o'clock Tuesday. All right. I walked over and looked at them. Dang, you want $75 a piece for them. They're brand new. So I went by on Tuesday, stood in line of about 80 and 90 people for about 45 minutes, got inside, picked up the 2 mufflers, bought them, took them back to my tent, went by Wagger and asked them if they had any. I said, we've gone out of business for them. Says, we were forced out. Univer told us that we weren't allowed to sell things that they were the type certificate holder of, so we don't carry the mufflers anymore. I got home and I checked the price of the mufflers from Univer, almost $800, but they're over $1,100 each now. So, believe me, they're out there not because they like you as Stinson owners and want to keep you flying, but they want to line their own pockets too. You know, and I'm against that. You know, I'm all right for somebody making a decent living and making a little profit, but you know, from 350 to over 1,100, that's in 3 years. Hold on, does it cost that much to store them? Do you pay that much tax whenever at the end of the year and you still got it on inventory? Is it costing that much to have them made? Well, one of our owners came through with an idea that he could get the exhaust pipes made that fit, and the mufflers that fit a 180 Franklin and a 220, and they're massive. They have an adapter that mounts to each cylinder, just as with gaskets, same as you would the original Franklin and Univer pipes and exhaust pipe. But then it comes out and it bolts, and it's got expansion joints, and they move and expand. And there's no STC to it. You're only doing a minor modification, and a logbook minor modification by installing that on it. And that's exactly what I did. I listed it that I installed a 180 and a 220 Franklin exhausts on there so that the engine would breathe a little better, and it was easier procurement. I think I got the whole set for like $6,000. And time you price out what you've got to Univer, you're going to pay almost that much for their original. And the original has a bad design because they are welded and they're stiffed, and every time the engine warms up, things move 1/8 of an inch or so, and about every year you're going to have to wind up having your mufflers welded. They'll crack around the bases and the connections, and bad way to go. So, none that I know of. I take my wheel pants off. Whenever I get ready to sell the airplane, I'll put the wheel pants back on. Suggest to the new owner, when he gets home, take them off. He can check his tires. If that tire gets low on pressure, it will slip on the rim. And it'll pull that valve stem out. You'll wind up with a flat someplace. So it's my recommendation, just take your wheel pants off. You know, that's my best solution for it, unless you have the spats. There's a couple of airplanes flying around with the spats, and I do have a set of spats for the red airplane, but the mounting on it, I've come up with the welder and how they attach to the other ones. I had a Dash 3 that had those on it, and I really loved them. That was 107 Zulu Papa, and if you ever see it, you would remember it. It's green and purple. 108-3. I loved that airplane, but somebody else liked it more than me. What's the spats? Spats, instead of coming down and covering the whole wheel, it comes over and covers just the very top of the wheel. And it fits over the very top of the wheel, and in doing it, any grass and mud or anything, it catches on that spats, and none of it gets on your wings or the side of your airplane. And of course, if you have wheel pants on there, you get that all built up inside your wheel pants, and if you're up north operating on snow and stuff, that's liable to freeze up. So I just solution to that is take the wheel pants off. You're talking about the cabin air coming in from the leading edge of the wing? Okay. In the wing itself, it's actually a poor design. There's a hole going in right near the cabin, and they took and they put a very loosely mounted piece of metal on the inside to direct the air over towards the cabin. A lot of owners have gone to a auto store or either get a scat hose and run it around to that inlet and run it back around to where it's right up in your adjuster coming into your cabin. One of them has got the magnetic, is it the magnetic compass on one or something? And I'm sorry, it's the outside air temp. It's got the outside air temp on it, and the other one is just plain, and you turn it to get your fuel. That's the best. Most of the wings that I rebuild, I go in there and reinforce that and put wing sealer in there. It's a two-part rubberized PVC, and I seal that whole area up so every bit of the air goes in there and comes into the cabin. In fact, at wintertime, you have a hard time shutting it and keeping it shut. So the impact of the air is so great. Yes, there is a fella that put one on it, if I recall, because I built him a stabilizer. He's based up in, his last name is Ross, I believe. And he comes on the chat group every once in a while. If you'll run that on the chat group, the Yahoo chat group, or we can run it through the type certificate, the newsletter, I'm sure you'll get an answer for it. Okay? He's an engineer and he got an STC for it. What does everybody use for oil in your Franklins? Straight weight, multi-weight, Phillips, Aeroshell. I think most people are using Aeroshell. Aeroshell has changed the designation on their bottles to W100. And I believe they've out from it, it says 50 weight. And that's for the straight. They do make a 20W50, which is an AD detergent oil. Then they make the straight mineral oil for break-in purposes. Getting to that, I wonder how many of you pour your oil out of your oil can the correct way. You know, most people open up the cap. There's a spout quite readily, and they quickly try to dump it in there and pour your oil in. Turn it around, pour it out of the backside. What I mean by the backside, put the spout over here, away from where you're going to pour it. As you turn it up, the air is still up there. The oil will never get up there until you get it past center, and then put it in. I don't know how many people I've seen unknowledgeable trying to pour MEK out of a 5-gallon can. They'll spill a gallon of it before they ever get a half a gallon in something, you know. But turn it to the backside. Take the cap off of it, tilt the can over, put your container there. As it comes past 90 degrees, it'll start filling up your container. Lift it back. You won't lose 2 ounces, you know, out of a 5-gallon can. But that's, many airplanes come into me and they've got oil leaks, oil leaks, oil leaks. I look at it, it's all around the oil filler cap because they don't know how to pour the oil in the engine. and believe it or not, the Aeroshell used to, on their older bottles, it had a picture showing you how to pour it. Let them hear what you're asking, so we can all get it. Come up here. Come up here. There you go. There you go.
I just want to go over with you again on this maintaining high revs, 2600 if you're cruising along at 2600 is what you're saying, you've got the mixture leaned and you maybe over 5,000 feet, is it safe to back the throttle off without the risk of the crankshaft breaking, or do you have to keep the revs up and descend with the revs up as much as you can?
It's my understanding that every time you go through that critical range, whether it's the 150 or the 165, all of that time is accumulative. It builds up. 6 hours, and I will buy you the best steak dinner if it doesn't break. Okay, it will break. Every time you take off, you're going through there for 30 seconds or so. Every time you pull the throttle back to come in for a landing, you're going through there. Get through that area as fast as you can. Whatever prop you're using, whatever engine you've got, has got a different harmonic range on it. The best insurance for that is the wooden props. Back to 2100. Pull it back to 2100 and descend under a little power so that you don't chill everything down. If you're up 9,000–10,000 feet, you don't want to cool everything too fast. Come down under a little power. You're going to be up around max airspeed, but hey, that's fun. Where does it break? Between number 2 and number 3 cylinder. It leaves the first 2 cylinders in there, but they won't make any power. There's no mag timing getting to it at the right time. Yeah. Yeah, it's good to have if you're overhauling it yourself, please get somebody to magnaflux it. And but they will crack. I've known, in 19 years, I've known about 7 of them that their crankshaft is broke. You know, and that's something you don't want to face. It's on one of the main journals. Yes, the crankshaft itself will break, not any of the not any of the rod, none of that. It's the crankshaft itself. That metal prop works as a harmonic vibration, like a tuning fork. Remember in the old days, and then go to your doctor and you'd, well, that's what that metal prop does. It takes every bit of the vibrations, it goes out and it comes back and it's amplified. And as it comes down that crankshaft, it finds that weak spot between that, in that one journal, and that's where it'll crack. And a wood prop, it will not do it. MT said that they have a certified prop that they would make for you. I think they want about $7,000 for their carbon fiber prop. It will not have harmonic vibrations to it. Or Cincinnati will sell you one of their wood props for about $3,000 something. Or there's plenty of wood props that come on the market that you can pick up for $500 or $600 or $800 or $2,000. I believe, and Cincinnati will recertify it for you. Well, my training and what I read in the operating manual for the Stinson is anytime you fly in, you start descending or you fly into clouds, any place there's moisture, if it starts raining, it's a good idea to put your carburetor heat on. I had a instructor and a student to go out, and they had 2 things wrong with it. This goes back to a 172 with an 0300 in it. On instrument training, it was raining that day. They took off, and you could hear metal to metal as they took off. They used almost all of the runway, 2,000 feet, getting airborne. They were gone about 20 minutes and came back and says, You know, there's something wrong. This airplane's sick. They pulled it right up to the hangar door and want me to pull in and look at it. So, all right, let me take a look. What do you mean? Well, it won't make power. We had to come full power taxiing in here. Hold on. I walked around and I said, take your parking brake off. They had tried to take off with the parking brake. Okay, that had them rattled. Now they're driving in rain. I asked, he said, well, the engine tried to quit. We couldn't make but 2,000, 2,100. Said the engine RPM went down. We did carb air heat, turned it on, turned it off, and it didn't do any good. It just, I mean, we were afraid the engine was going to quit. I said, we came back, and I said, well, you probably were wise for doing that. I said, but when did you turn on the carb air heat? Oh, whenever it started, RPM went down to about 2,000. I said, I believe the manual says if you fly into rain, you should have your carb air heat on. I said, you probably was icing up. No, I've got over 30,000 hours. Airline captain, retired, instructor, teaching instrument to one of the airport owners. And I said, well, let me see. I took off the filter, and it was one of the foam filters. And whenever I did, it was heavy as it could be. I squeezed it, and the water got about this big on the asphalt down below it. The filter was full of water, and the spark plugs was drowning out. So they said, well, what would carb air heat have done to it? And I said, well, it probably would have evaporated some of that water as it went up through the carburetor, and it was warmed up. And you wouldn't have drowned your spark plugs, but not putting the carb air heat at all on there, you took a chance of carb icing and also drowning out your spark plugs. I said, you're lucky to make it back. Always put on your carb air heat. I was never taught that. I've never been, I've got over 30,000 hours. And I said, well, please let my student do that whenever she's flying with you, okay? So, in your Franklin, it'll do the same thing, but Franklin's more prone to icing than a lot of others.
I'm Bret Chilcott from Neodesha, Kansas, and owned a Stinson for about 3 years. And so, of the people in here, would you raise your hand if you're thinking about buying a Stinson, if you don't already have one? Okay, just a few of you. That's good. So, this message is for everybody here. Those that are thinking about buying a Stinson, and for those of you that own a Stinson. If you own a Stinson, I challenge you to be an ambassador for the brand, okay? I visited the Bonanza group over there, and I was just amazed at the support that they have. And we don't have the resources like they have. There's not as many airplanes out there, but we can do it by supporting new people and people that have an interest in our brand. And what I mean by that is I'm going to share the story with you of how I came about buying the Stinson. I used to own a Cessna 172 years ago, and things in my life changed. I sold that airplane, and about 4 or 5 years ago I decided, okay, I'm going to buy an airplane. And I kind of enjoy digging through Trade-A-Plane and Barnstormers and everything online and saying, what is the best value in aviation for me today? I figured, okay, I want to spend $20,000 to $30,000. I want to buy something that's pretty much ready to go. I don't want to do a lot of work to it. And so I spent months, actually over a year, trying to figure out what was the best value. I decided that a Stinson 108 was the plane for me. I didn't really care if it was a Dash 1, 2, or 3. But so I decided that, but what I was going to base my decision on was here at Oshkosh. So a little over 3 years ago, I drove to Oshkosh, and a lot of you owners out there, I pat you on the back because you didn't kick me in the shins and tell me to get away, because I spent 4 days going from airplane to airplane, studying them, looking for ones that were for sale, and talking to the owners if they were there. And the owners, for the most part, were very, very supportive. When I wasn't doing that, I spent all my other time at the type table over here by the Red Barn, and I would sit off to the side and listen to all the questions and concerns. So based on that, I decided that I was going to buy a Stinson. you all invited me. Somebody in this group invited me to dinner with the group, even though I didn't even own a Stinson. I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I don't even own a Stinson. So we went to the same place we're going tonight, Wentz, and I was standing in line, and a guy in line, I think he was from Australia. He said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm thinking about buying a Stinson. He pulled a flyer out of his pocket, and he said, you know, somebody dropped this by the booth today. Here's an airplane for sale. It's in Watertown, Wisconsin. So it was aluminized, and I really didn't want an aluminized airplane. I found out the airplane had been sitting 18 years in the hangar. It had been pickled. It was painted in 1977. And anyway, make a long story short, I checked the airplane out. We flew it, and it's a honey. And so I know there's a lot of downsides of buying an airplane that's been sitting in a hangar for that long, but it's a good airplane. I applaud the old Franklin engine. My nephew and I fly it all the time. And we did come through a lot of rain on the way down here. But anyway, I encourage you all as owners to be ambassadors for the brand. And what I mean by that is put your arm around these people that are thinking about buying a Stinson. Tell them what you like about it and what you don't like about it, and give them some guidance. That's my message for you, because if we work together to promote the brand, Univair and these companies will continue to build parts for them. Any questions for me? Okay. One other thing is we're having the Stinson Summit in Beaumont, Kansas. Beaumont, Kansas is a historic place that you land in a pasture, go down to an asphalt road and taxi into town, and they got a hotel there, and we're going to be renting the facility there September 28th and 9th in Beaumont, Kansas. So thank you. We're all, a lot of us are parked on row 79. Come by and see us. Oh, one other thing. On the Facebook group, there's a lot of good information there. There's a poster there that I posted, and I challenged pilots coming to Oshkosh to print that out and put it on your dash or put it on your propeller. The message is, would you like to own an airplane someday? The Stinson's a great airplane. Here's some information. Come to the Red Barn, come to the Vintage Group, see us on Facebook, and if you want more information while I'm here, here's my name and phone number. I got a text. Is that guy here today? I got a text. Okay, right over here. You saw the sign on my prop, right? Okay, he saw the sign on my prop, and I get this text from some guy I don't know. He says, "Hey, I saw the flyer on your prop. Where can we hook up?" So I'm glad you came. So be ambassadors for the brand. Thank you.
Thanks, Bret. I appreciate that. I appreciate Billy Carter for giving a presentation on the Stinson as well. And I certainly appreciate you guys being here and coming to our forum today. And again, if you want to come to dinner, just come by the table, sign up. So we've got a head count. We'll know. And you can join us tonight. We'll be at 6 o'clock right after their show. We'll leave right in front of the Vintage Red Barn. There'll be a bus right there, and then we'll go to Leon's afterwards. So with that, thank you.